I thought about this the other day because there's so much talk about NBA ratings being terrible today at all-time lows, and everybody's trying to figure out why the ratings in the NBA are terrible. I'd say there's so many reasons for it. Just it's like the perfect storm. There's like several reasons, but it got me thinking. I started to think about LeBron and how he's also impacted the ratings. He's had a negative effect on them. And then I started thinking about just the similarities between LeBron and Hulk Hogan. And I started thinking about it deeply. And it just hit me that LeBron is the Hulk Hogan of the NBA, if you think about it. So I'll go back to just my childhood. During the first half of the 90s, I was a kid. And during the second half of the 90s, I was a teenager. You'll see where this goes into play. So during the first half of the 90s, I was a huge wrestling fan, and the same would be said throughout the whole entire 90s. But when I was a kid, I viewed it differently. Just I loved Hulk Hogan. He was the iconic figure of that time. He was the guy all the little kids looked up to. We saw the vitamins commercials, and we thought Hulk was cool. He even had a few movies where he was just this blockbuster, larger than life star, and it was great. Just we all were sucked into it and didn't think much else about that. Hope was this like superhero. That's how I viewed him during my childhood phase. Just I enjoyed just everything about Hulkamania. But then it started to change as time progressed, which is that once I started becoming a teenager during the mid to late 90s, I still liked wrestling, but then it became competitive. There was WCW and then there was WWE. And they would have the Monday Night Wars where you would have Monday Night Raw and you would have WCW Nitro. I would tune into both of them, and it was a lot of fun. It was exciting to see just two organizations go at it, and they would push each other. You would have entertaining shows because they were competing against each other, and it was great. Hogan became this villain in WCW. He created the NWO, which was him and a bunch of former WWE superstars going against just the rest of WCW. What was interesting about that time was that WWE was initially struggling because they didn't have the star power to compete with WCW initially once their talent was taken away. And they had a bunch of unknowns, so they had to rebrand themselves, and they did eventually successfully, discovering Stone Cold and The Rock and just promoting those guys big time and just making the shows just more entertaining than WCW, just pushing the boundaries of that era, just doing stuff that you wouldn't think that they would do on live TV or just their shows, that they were just changing that dynamics of just how the wrestling game was going to be viewed. And it was just exciting, a lot of fun. These stars were younger. We didn't know much about them, which made it even more exciting about The Rock and Stone Cold. However, the problem with WCW was that what initially gave them the edge against Monday Night Raw and WWE was that they had the established stars. They had the old guard in Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Lex Luger, Macho Man, just all those guys that I loved when I was a kid. But once I became like a teenager, I just started to not really view those guys as cool anymore. Just they were no longer just like the guys I were entertained by, because they started becoming guys that were like, wow, these dudes are basically my dad's age. I don't find them entertaining anymore. I've seen enough of them. I'm tired of them. I'm just going to tune into Monday Night Raw because Stone Cold, Rock, they're just brand new and I just like them. They're just more entertaining and they're not my dad's age. So I feel like I can just really relate to these guys even more. Just I'm more excited by them. They're bringing new things. These old guys, I don't care about them anymore. I'm tired of them. I don't like watching Hulk Hogan anymore. He doesn't do it for me when it comes to entertainment. And I feel LeBron is like the Hulk Hogan of the NBA. If you think about it, a lot of these young kids today are old enough to be LeBron's kids. That's the funny thing about it. They view him as this like old guy that's up there with their dad's age or from their parents' generation. Just he's no longer like the young rising star, and they just don't care about him. I think that's a large degree about it. But the problem with WCW was Hulk Hogan sucked up all the oxygen of the room. It was just him and the old guard that eventually people got tired of them. They saw every story imaginable with these guys, Hulk and Macho Man, and it just wasn't enough anymore. Just people had seen enough of it and they wanted to see young stars in WCW. And I think this is the problem in the NBA is that they failed to establish young stars to replace LeBron and Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant. I would say LeBron's like the equivalent of Hulk Hogan because he's like the old guy that sucks up all the oxygen in the room. Then you have established stars like Durant and Curry, who would be the equivalent of like Macho Man, Kevin Nash, those types of guys. And that's the issue is like those guys are no longer in their primes anymore, and people don't care about them. But these are the guys that the NBA has marketed the most. So it's like there's not a buzz for new stars. The NBA has not done a good job establishing new stars. For being honest, you could say that the issue also is the new stars tend to be foreigners like Giannis, Doncic, Jokic, SGA, and then you don't really have any young rising American stars. You have possibly Anthony Edwards, maybe, but the Timberwolves took a step back by getting rid of Cat. But he was probably the most promising young star you could market. But now it's probably going to be tough since he's not really winning enough games to be pushed during the playoffs where the spotlight really does matter for prime time and establishing a star. And then you have a guy like Tatum who's just boring. He's as boring as oatmeal. There's just nothing about him that's entertaining. So you don't have that now. And I'm trying to think of some other young dynamic rising stars. There are guys like, I would say Zion, that was supposed to be that new guy they could push, but obviously he doesn't care about his career. He's pretty much done. I don't see Zion ever taking the spotlight and becoming that young dynamic rising superstar. Then you have a guy like Ja Morant who stunted his growth by getting in trouble the last few years and then getting the injuries. He still could become that primetime star, that guy the NBA desperately needs to get people into the game. That's a possibility, but time will tell. That's what I would say. I think he could turn it around in that regard, but still, there's just not enough star power now of young stars to replace the old guard in LeBron, Curry, and Durant. And this is one of many issues the NBA is having when it comes to ratings. I wouldn't say it's the only one. It's one of them that LeBron took up all the oxygen along with some of these old guard guys that now the NBA is having a problem selling this stuff to viewers, young and old, because they don't really have a new crop of young stars to really market and push. So now they're just in a tough bind, and I think that's really the issue here. LeBron is definitely Hulk because he got all the marketing. People still talk about him, even though his team is not relevant anymore. But there's no one to replace the marketing power of him, so they're just leeching off of him. The media is, and it's social media, whatnot. So that's really one of the main issues here is that they have to find a way to create new stars and to get off of LeBron's nuts. The media is relying on him heavily to market shit. That's why they talk about the Lakers 24/7. They have to find a way to brand new guys. It's not going to be easy because you have the foreign influx, but it's hard to sell foreign players to an American audience. Maybe they'll have some success with Victor. I think he could break that mold. He seems likable just to also American audiences. So I think they might get lucky with Victor. I think he has the charisma to pull it off. His English is pretty good when you hear him talk, so I think that's going to help. But when you look at these other foreign stars, it's going to be difficult. I think Jokic, if his name was Nick Johnson instead of Nikola Jokic, he would be really marketable. That's the thing. Just it's the foreign influence that makes it hard to market these guys. And I say this as a big fan of these guys. I actually like them, so there's no xenophobia cut for my part. I'm just talking about the casual American audience. They want people they can relate to. So I think that's the issue here. That's why you're having a lot of hype about this Cooper Flag kid, because he's a white American that they feel that they could sell to this audience. That's really the big deal about him. They think he's going to be some Larry Bird type of guy. They're hoping for it, but that's why they're pushing him really hard in college. I haven't watched any of his games, so I can't comment on him whether or not he'll be great. But that's really the buzz. So the NBA really has to find a way to market young American stars it doesn't matter the race, whether they're white or black or whatever, but they just had to find a way to brand them. And I think that's one of the ways they can bring back the ratings, but it's not the only way. There's several things they have to do. And I'll mention that in other videos, but that's just one of the points I wanted to make.